Helo a croeso I Sir Gâr Greadigol. Enw fi ydy Melanie Owen ac yn ymuno â fi heddi ydy Radha Patel o Ffilm Hwb Wales. Mae croeso I chi ymuno gyda'r trafodaeth heddi wrth popio cwestiwn neu unrhyw sylwadau sydd gennych chi yn y Q&A box yn y chat. My name's Melanie and thank you for joining us today at Gâr Greadigol, Creative Carmarthenshire. Joining me today is Radha Patel from Ffilm Hwb Wales. If you wanted to join in with the chat, then you're more than welcome to pop a question in the Q&A box on Zoom. So Radha, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, Melanie. Yeah, I'm really good. Despite the terrible weather, I'm feeling really good.
Oh, excellent. No, it is terrible, but at least, we haven't got any pathetic fallacy going on here. The weather's bad, but we're great.
Absolutely, yeah.
So just to kick us off, what is Ffilm Hwb Wales?
Okay, so Ffilm Hwb Wales is one of 8 film hubs that is basically funded by the BFI's Film and Audience Network. And there are 8 different film hubs around the country, and they're basically in charge of supporting exhibitors and audiences and ensuring that British and independent film gets seen and gets seen by audiences in these independent venues. And then Ffilm Hwb Wales specifically looks after that in Wales.
And so I believe that your main role is the Made in Wales side, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So what do you do in your kind of with your Made in Wales hat on?
Okay, so Made in Wales was, even though I started as the project officer, the Made in Wales officer in January. Made in Wales is something that Ffilm Hwb Wales has been doing since they started here, I think back in 2014. So like I said, so film hubs are in charge of really supporting independent cinemas and exhibitors to see British independent film. And then Made in Wales is a project that focuses all of that attention, takes the kind of already existing strands and then focuses on films with Welsh connections. So the film doesn't necessarily have to be made in Wales, physically made in Wales, but it could have a Welsh storyline or a Welsh director, leading cast or crew, anything that's anything that's connected to Wales, basically.
Oh, that's really interesting. So it's, the Made in Wales is a bit of an umbrella term. Like you say, it doesn't necessarily have to be made in Wales. It could be any sort of connection. And I was wondering, have you worked on any kind of international projects maybe under that umbrella or outside of Wales in general?
So we haven't worked, so we haven't worked on anything, I would say, international. At the moment. At the moment, we're just trying to support, exhibitors as they reopen. So there are a lot of films that were sort of were being made, and then because of the pandemic, unfortunately, went straight to kind of video on demand or to Sky or to Netflix, that sort of thing. Some of them will have may come back to have theatrical release later in the year, that sort of thing. But at the moment, we're just trying to support the films that are coming out into the cinema. We're trying to support them to get in front of exhibitors and audiences.
Amazing. So, what's going on in the Welsh film industry at the moment then? For somebody who doesn't know anything about it, what would you say? Because you mentioned obviously we're in that kind of almost post-COVID era. I don't want to jinx it, but touch wood, we're in a post-COVID era, kind of. What's the Welsh film industry looking like at the moment?
Super positive and super healthy. I think people don't realise, myself included, I came from programming independent cinema. I from into this role, and I think just having to talk to family and friends about it as well. I don't think people realize how much content, how many films are actually not just physically made in Wales, but attached to Wales through, I said, a Welsh connection, a storyline or a director or or a cast and crew. How much there's so much investment. It's it's a really healthy, thriving, like developing sector. And it's really exciting. It's really exciting to see not only, I guess, like economic investment go into that, but also to see Wales represented in so many different lights. I think obviously there's always like more to work on, but yeah, I think it's really exciting.
I love what you said there about, Wales being seen in so many different lights, because,
Yeah.
as people who, are from Wales and live in Wales and so on, it can be really frustrating, can't it, when you see a depiction of Wales in the media or on film or in something, and you can kind of tell there's not really been a Welsh connection or a Welsh voice in that decision, because you're like, that's not the Wales I know.
Absolutely. I think I remember I had a conversation with someone a few years ago who was saying, you can often, like, there's like peaks and troughs, and often we get these kinds of representations of like Wales being like the countryside, or this like dark, dreary kind of like murder that happens like in the countryside, but then also the way that people are depicted, they're quite like, there's like a kind of like a backwards mentality, and like some really like awful stereotypes that just absolutely don't represent how diverse or how like beautiful this country is, or just like how people are just like people.
Absolutely, like we're like everybody else. We're like everybody else. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
so
yet
it's been
unique.
really great. So I'm like thinking of things off the top of my head. So of course there's so some like really great independent films that I actually think have come out this year, that I'm like really like thinking of the top of my head. So one is Lindsay Walker's The Welshman. So I know that that's been like doing the rounds on social media, but it's it's a really fantastic documentary, again about nationalism, but really about like like fighting against about imperialist subjugation. I think that's really great. There's also a film. There's The Toll, which is kind of like a Welsh Western.
Oh.
Yeah, recently I also saw this like very short film by Fine Rolling Media called The Showdown, which is about like a young autistic boy, and it's sort of like he's like quite obsessed with Westerns, and then he kind of ends up in a showdown for his town. It's really like, so there's like so much going on, everything from like drama to things that you wouldn't expect to documentary to all kinds of like different nuances and tellings of Wales. And I think what I love about working at Film Hub, and what I think is really important about Film Hub and exhibition, and my role as a Made in Wales officer, is making sure that audiences get to see that.
Absolutely. If all this great content is being made in this industry, and then people aren't maybe having the opportunity or the access to it, that would be devastating, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And on that note, exhibition is so important, because what happens is we go from like, there are so many different stages to making a film. There are so many different stages to developing a film. So we go from funding to development, to production, to post-production. And exhibition is this lovely sector at the end, where it's kind of taking that final product, and it's really working with independent cinemas and exhibitors, and really I guess how do I explain this? I'm like a little bit like lost for words now, because I'm so excited.
You're so passionate about it.
Yeah, but I always say that like cinema should be accessible to everyone, and I think that it really, when we really make a commitment to go, okay, here's this really beautiful film that was made in Wales, possibly on like a very small budget. Not many people might know about it. And when we really make that effort to put it out there, we're also, we're committing ourselves to the people that made it. And we're also committing ourselves to audiences, because we're saying that, you as an audience deserve to have this story about your country and your culture shown to you. Like, you deserve to feel the warmth and the impact of that story.
Absolutely. On that note of accessibility, it's a very weird dilemma because almost with, like you mentioned, you know, a lot of these kind of independent films will have been made on a tight budget compared to the type of films that we would normally go and see in a very mainstream cinema. And yet there's something about independent cinema that seems very elitist. It almost seems like, oh, I wouldn't be able to go and watch that because it'll be too highbrow for me. I won't understand it probably. It'll be far too artsy, which is, you know, I'm sure not the case whatsoever. So how do we bridge that gap between people who would love to see that art but feel like it's not for them?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because in my last role as a programmer, like I worked really closely. I worked specifically with a remit to do that, to really make sure that that independent film was getting to people that might not necessarily be able to. That might not necessarily be hearing about those films. And I think that it starts with them. I think that it really starts with going, okay, who is the target audience for this film? Well, actually, how do I explain this? Okay, it's like this. So I think that those films are considered like quite highbrow and quite elite. Like, it has that kind of elitist kind of, I don't know how to, like what you were saying to it. I think it's because we always start with the it's like when you put a film out, because of the way that we live, because of the structures that we live in, the people that are automatically going to have access to that film are people who are already quite fluent in those cultures. So people who are white, people who have like a middle class background and who've grown up with money, and also the kind of cultural fluency, like access to those cultural fluencies, to be able to know, like, okay, I really like these kinds of films. I know where to look them up. I know which cinema to go to. So I think the really important thing is to flip that, is to go, okay, who is not accessing those films? And then look at like really directly targeting them, like really going out and not expecting them to go to the cinema, not expecting them to surpass the barriers of I don't know, one, like, I guess economically, you know, we just expect these people to turn up at the cinema and like pay £10 to go see a ticket, but actually going, okay, how can we support exhibitors? How do we support venues and projects? And how do we like to reach those communities? And then also, how do we support the communities themselves to show those films to their own community? So how do we give people agency to, like, really thinking about how we give people the agency to run their own film clubs or to run their own cinemas?
Absolutely. Do you know, I had personal experience of that where I so wanted, it was a film called 8 Days a Week. So it was like a documentary film about the Beatles, and there were certain independent cinemas who were showing it, and they were showing the red carpet beforehand and all sorts. And I messaged like my local independent cinema and I said, will you be showing it? Please, 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 please. And they said, well, no, because we can't do it if you're going to be the only one who comes. So I was like, leave it with me. Leave it with me. And I went out and I was like, I'm going to find these people. I was like, come on down. And do you know what? It worked, and they showed it and they marketed it further from there. So, you know, that is one example of how actually, isn't it, with an independent cinema, you do have that access to a human being. You know, you can go and say to them, how can we make this happen? This is something that I'm really interested in. How can it happen?
Absolutely. And I think that is like such a key point, because, you know, we're not necessarily talking about multiplexes where you have to like, you know, you have to like reach 7 people before you get an answer or before you get an email. Like, these are on the ground, like people who are on the ground, who are running, like, you know, it's like, it's the same of when we say support your independent, you know, support local independent businesses. It's very much the same for independent cinemas, to go talk to them, support them. Like, it's that kind of contact and that kind of relationship that like it's the foundation of community building at the end of the day. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you said, they're a key part of that local community.
Absolutely.
So in your role then, would you say that, you come in, the content has been made and is now ready to be seen by exhibitors? Are you, say, then the bridge between the content creator, the filmmaker and so on, and the exhibitors, the cinemas and so on?
Yeah, in so many ways. Yeah, there's obviously steps between that. So like it would go to, if it's not if it would go to a distributor, or if it's being distributed by that independent person, then so the idea is that we would say, if it is an independent film and someone is distributing it by themselves, they would come to us and we would say, okay, this is really great, we'd watch the film. And that's a really big part of it too. And because I'm really keen to not just take the film and give it to exhibitors, but actually have a look and go, okay, what can we do, budget depending, to really help promote that film? What kind of assets can we create? What can we do around that film to really create a buzz and get people excited and get people knowing about it? And then what we do is we have lots of different, I guess, like there are lots of different stages that we can offer to filmmakers to be able to do that. So we will put it in we have a very secure private preview room that's only open to Film Hub members. And then that film goes in there, and that means that exhibitors can just kind of watch it within their own time and go, okay, yeah, I think I'll program it, or maybe that's not for me. We also have, and we have one coming up, we have Welsh Film Preview Days. So we basically invite exhibitors from across the UK to watch films with Welsh connections. We spend a day watching them, and then exhibitors, and it gives them then a chance to to kind of watch a bunch of films at once and then decide whether they want those for their program. So we have one coming up on the 4th of June, and we have some really incredible, again, independent films. One of them, so we have Donna, which I actually I managed to, I saw it a couple of weeks ago when we were given access. And so Jay Bedwani, who's the filmmaker, it's a documentary about Donna, who is a trans woman. It's American, and he's spent, I'm pretty sure it's about 5 years just working with her and building this friendship and following her around, and this is a documentary about her life, and it's so special. I think things like that are so important. And then sorry, I feel like I've gone off topic there.
No, you go off topic. This sounds excellent.
And I think I was going to say on that note, also it's not quite, I know it's not quite finished yet. But I think it will be coming out maybe sometime next year. But Ela Marotra Jenkins is also making this film called Hijra about trans community in India too. And I was saying to my team yesterday, I think it's so wonderful and exciting that we have there's 2 films about about trans people coming out within next year, basically. I think that's so incredible. They're both Welsh films, and I think that is so important.
I know it is absolutely vital. And how incredible is it that you're able to show and exhibit content on such topical matters that are really going to touch people directly.
Absolutely.
And really, you've got there before commercial cinema.
Absolutely. And with I think particularly for trans communities as well, because these are such these are such important times to really get people understanding trans issues. And really I just think it's going to be so fantastic when these films come out in Wales.
Absolutely.
I can't wait for young trans kids to see those films and to see that like, oh yeah, they've been made in like they're Welsh films. I think that's, yeah, I'm so excited.
Absolutely. Oh, do you know what, even personally, that is such a moving kind of part of what you do, because I grew up in Wales, I watched Welsh media and so on, and I felt like I never saw myself on screen. I felt like I was Welsh, but I never saw myself on Welsh screen. So the fact that you're able to bring that is just incredible, isn't it?
And that's the real, like, I think the crux of it is, you know, I think like the thing about exhibition and the thing about programming as well is that, you know, I think it's so great that, like, you know, that Welsh government and industries want to pump money into production and development. I think that's so important, because to give people the opportunities to write their own stories, and you know, I think when you're from a marginalized community and you get the chance to do that, you write your own stories, then you no longer become a token. Like diversity is not like a sort of like an in trend issue. It's like, no, it's actually happening. I think that's so important. But equally, exhibition is just as important, because you're saying, okay, you're almost like finishing that commitment to marginalized communities, because you're saying, okay, now that film is going to get shown to audiences, it's going to get shown to the communities that you come from, it's going to get shown to the communities that the film is about, if it's about a different community. So it's really like exhibition is really completing that commitment to marginalized communities. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's more than those communities seeing themselves, because that is one very, very important part, but also people who don't often see people who don't look like them on screen. So, you know,
absolutely.
Yeah, you know, then we're this very so often seeing themselves there when they do see somebody else. It opens their eyes, the education, that's equally as vital, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it just means, like we said at the beginning, like we were talking about, it just means that, you know, Wales gets seen as having this like really like nuanced identity, you know, that is, yes, it goes back to like these like countryside murder mysteries, fine, but it also means that, you know, yeah, there are a whole bunch of other ways of like looking at our looking at Wales. Yeah.
So we have one question that I wanted to ask you, because it's very much on this topic, and before we run out of time. So they've said, I'm a newbie filmmaker and I'm coming to the end of creating my project. What do I have to do to get in touch with Film Hub Wales? Is there an application process, or do I simply get in touch?
So you can go to our website and you can get in touch. You can get in touch with any of us, but you can, once your project is finished, you can get in touch with us, and then we'll basically we usually get people to fill in. It's on the website, but if you get in touch, like I can send this. It's called a Made in Wales form, and it's basically a form that we get people to fill out that basically tells us all about their film, and we put these details on our database, on our website, so if exhibitors come asking, we can tell them all about it, and then from there we basically get to know you and your film. We go, okay, is it suitable? And then we kind of make decisions around, okay, do we invest a bit of budget into making additional assets? Do we put it for do we put it in our preview day? Do we put it in our preview room so exhibitors can see it? Do we, you know, how do we, it just lets us know like how we shout about that film, basically.
Excellent. So you walk them through it, especially if this is a newbie person. I'm sure they'd be really grateful for your support, because this is something they won't have done before.
Absolutely. And, you know, we always say like, get in touch with us sooner rather than later, because exhibitors program films months in advance. They set their programs months in advance. You know, community cinemas, I used to work for a community cinema program. I mean, that's like a year in advance, because they're doing a whole bunch of other, you know, they might be doing a whole bunch of other things. So, as you know, get in touch with us, you know, when you're making the film, you know, get in touch with us when it's done, like as soon as possible. Just let us know. and then we're keeping the conversation going all the time. And that way also, when, you know, you release your big feature 10 years down the line, it just means that we have this kind of like, we've built up this really solid, lovely relationship. We've built up this relationship with you, and you've built this relationship with exhibitors. So it's kind of, yeah.
All ties together.
All ties together. Yeah, I was like, trying to think of the word.
Absolutely. That's a really important point on time frame, isn't it? One to note for sure. Well, Radha, thank you so much. I could talk to you for hours, and I hope that we do get the opportunity to talk again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Melanie.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And thank you so much to everybody who has joined us today and has submitted their questions. Diolch yn fawr iawn I pawb sydd wedi ymuno. Yn y cader yma wythnos nesaf, mi fydd Carys Ifan. Felly dwi'n gobeithio mi fydd chi'n gallu ymuno â hi wedyn. Diolch yn fawr.